Louis. It is Friday, therefore it is Stories for Children, and this week we have the amazing, the fantastic, the fantabulous Sarah Lloyd Winder. Over to you, Sarah. It's the beginning of an amazing weekend leading up to World Storytelling Day, which is Sunday, of course. So to start our weekend of gloriousness, please welcome Sarah Lloyd Winder.
Woo! What an introduction. Thank you, everybody. Woo! Good evening from sunny. It is sunny. Woo! And the bells are ringing out because they're practicing and it's still light. So during this storytelling session, I'm expecting the light to dim slightly because it's sun's going down, goes down about 10, 15 past. So we shall see. Well, because the sun is going down, I thought I would do an origin story. And this is a First Nation story. And this tells the story of the light. And I really like this story because we like the light and the change. Before anything, before there was a flood and then it receded, before there were animals walking on the earth, before there were trees and plants, before there were birds in those trees and plants, before there were rivers with fish. No, not quite before there were rivers with fish. Before there were fish in the river, but not before the river. Because there was an old man and he lived in a little hut by the river with his daughter. And whether she was beautiful as the trees that sway in the breeze, or whether she wasn't quite that beautiful, nobody knew. Well, the old man didn't know because he couldn't see anything, because everywhere was dark, dark as black inky night, dark as black, no light nowhere. No light inside the hut, no light outside the hut, which got very awkward for people because you couldn't see where the water stopped and the bank started. You couldn't see where the stones were. You couldn't see where the odd tree was. It was very difficult. But you see, if you'd listened at the door of the hut, when the girl was outside, you would have heard the old man as he opened a box and took out a box. And then he opened a box and took out the box. And then he opened a box and he took out the box. And he opened the box and he took out the box. And he opened the box. And it went on and on and on until he got to the smallest box. It was very small. And inside that little tiny box was an orb with the light of the universe. And that old man, he kept it back in his box and he put it in a box, 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 in a box. And he kept that box in the corner of his house and he told nobody because it was his box and his light and he wasn't having anybody else have the light of the universe. Except one day, when he was opening his boxes and chortling away about a box in a box in a box and the light of the universe, someone was outside listening. Because many things were not there, but one thing was, and that was Raven. And Raven was tricky, and Raven was clever. And Raven had heard little muttery noises before. So today Raven came and he listened outside the house. He put his ear right next to the wood and he listened and he heard all about the boxes, all about the orb and the light of the universe. And of course, Raven being Raven, he said to himself, there's light in that house. I am going to steal it. And that is when Raven started. But it was very difficult. You see, it was dark all the time and he couldn't see his way into the hut. He couldn't seem to get inside. He would be at one side listening, and it was like the door would open on the other side. And then he'd rush round and he'd listen again, and the door was opened on the other side. He never seemed to get to the point when the door was opening. So he moved away from the hut and he sat thinking as only Raven could think, cunningly. And he sat there and he listened, and he could hear the old man's steps, a step, a step, a step, a step. And he could hear the young daughter's step, step, light, step, light, step, light. And that's when he got his plan. So he waited till one day he heard the daughter go out. Step light, step light, step light. And she went to the river with her bucket to get water. And she put the bucket in the water and drew up a bucket full. And that is when Raven did his first magic. He turned himself into a tiny, tiny pine needle and dropped himself into the bucket and released a sweet smell that makes everybody want to drink the water because it is so fresh. So of course, what did the young girl do? Well, the young girl, she smelt that beautiful smell and she wanted to drink the water. So she drank the water, and as she drank, that little tiny pine needle slipped down inside the young woman, and it went down her throat and down and down and down until it was in a nice, soft, warm part of that young lady's body. And then Raven, he did his next bit of magic. He turned himself into a tiny, tiny human. It was a very unusual looking human, but it was a tiny human, and he went to sleep right inside her insides. And there stayed that little raven baby as it grew. Well, you see, the father, he never saw any difference because it was dark all the time. And the young girl, she might have seen some, felt some difference, but she didn't know what was going on. So time passed. And Raven slept through the whole thing, and he grew bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until the time came for Raven to come into the world like any other human baby. And out he came, squealing and shouting like a raven baby would. And luckily, nobody could see him in the dark because Raven baby looked odd. Raven baby had a nose that was more like a beak. Raven baby had eyes that were round and sparkling like a bird's eyes. And Raven baby had feathers sticking out where there shouldn't be feathers. Raven baby had feathers on his shoulders, feathers on his elbows, feathers on his hands, even feathers down his back. Now, in the next weeks and months, Raven baby grew. And sometimes he was a happy, chortling, playing baby like all babies, or sometimes he was a horrible, screaming raven baby, screaming and tantruming. But eventually that baby, he persuaded the old man to love him, to love that squalling mass of raven babiness. And the old man loved his grandson. And this is what Raven wanted. One day, Raven shuffled across the room in his baby form, and he got the boxes, and he brought the boxes, and he was just trying to get open the first box when the old man was there snatching it up. No, 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 he said. But Raven Baby was very clever. Between being lovely and delightful and screaming with a tantrum, he got his own way. And he got one box to play with, to sit in, to roll around, to enjoy. But like any child, one box is not enough. One box was soon discarded. Baby wanted the next box. And through his tantrums and his joy and his giggling and his delightfulness, he got the next box. And so it went on with Raven Baby manipulating his grandfather, getting one box, another box, after another box. And as soon as the box had become boring, he threw it away and started back again. And so one day he got to the last box, the one where the light of the universe was hidden. And that was far too much for the father, the grandfather. He snatched the box away. But Raven Baby pleaded and cajoled and chortled and held out his little hands. And you know what babies' little hands are and the noises babies make. And the grandfather couldn't resist it. And he took out the orb with the light of the universe and he threw it. And in a smitch, match, smitch, that Raven Baby changed. Suddenly he was no longer a little baby. Suddenly he was all raven. He was all tall and dark and black and night-like, with real eyes and real beak and real feathers. And he snatched up the light of the universe into his beak. He bent down and he shot up out of the smoke hole in the middle of the little hut, and was out into the world before the grandfather could even grab him. And out in the world there was Raven, and the light flooded out the sides of his mouth. And for the first time ever, he could see mountains and shapes. And of course, Raven forgot that when he illuminated the world, he illuminated himself. And there he was, a dark, dark target with a glowing mouth. And over on the other side of the valley was the eagle standing there waiting. Oh, lunch. He suddenly saw lunch, and he'd never seen lunch look so nice before. Lunch was always difficult to find if you had to scoop around in the dark. But there it was, sitting there, illuminated. And suddenly the race was on. Eagle flying after Raven, twisting and turning and turning and twisting. And it was a beautiful battle. And at one point, Raven opened his mouth, and part of the orb dropped down onto the earth, boing, and broke one big round piece, and thousands upon thousands of tiny little scatterings of dusty shininess, which then bounced back into the sky, the moon and the stars. But Eagle did not give up very quickly, and soon he was after the Raven again, twisting and turning and twisting until Raven took off straight, flying straight for the edge of the world, the rim of the world. And when he got there, chased by the eagle, he opened his mouth and he dropped out the light that illuminates the universe, the light that is the sun. And with that, both raven and eagle fell back with the light that's so bright. And back at the little house, the grandfather stopped crying and screaming for the loss of the orb with the light. And he looked across at his daughter. And he might have wondered before what she looked like. But she was as beautiful as the light. And he was pleased. So he accepted the light. And that is how Raven stole the light of the universe. Thank you. Woo. I like that. I do like origin stories, and I do like stories with moons and suns and things. Oh, so I don't think I've told this story here before, and I'm hoping I haven't, because it was just about thinking about lights and things took me to this story called The Apple Tree Man, and it comes from Somerset, which is where I come from when I'm not in South Mims. I've been in South Mims a long time, but I must say I feel closer to Somerset. So this is a story from there. There was once a family, a man and 2 children. Now they all said that when his wife died, that's when it started. His bitterness grew and grew. Because this man, he had a farm, he had animals and children. But for some reason, nobody could ever find out why. He decided he'd heard, somebody had told him, he understood, there was treasure on his farm. And so it started to get in his brain. He started to think about nothing but treasure. I want to find the treasure. I'm going to find the treasure. And instead of going out every day and looking after his cows and his pigs and his sheep and his chickens and his ducks and his family, he went out and he dug holes to find treasure. Every morning he'd get up, he'd have his breakfast, he'd go out and he'd start on a new field, digging holes. And then nothing. So he'd leave the pile of rubbish, he wouldn't fill it in, and he'd go to the next one, digging a hole, dig till the entire place was covered in holes. There was no land for the cows and the sheep and the pigs to graze on because there were just holes, big holes. Big enough to fall into, and his farm was going to rack and ruin. Now a sad thing happened and he died, and he left his farm to his eldest child, his son. And somehow he also left that treasure hunting fever. It seemed to pass almost immediately into the son. He divided up the farm. He said, I'll take the farmhouse and I'll have all the good animals, and you can have the house down the road, to his younger sister, and you can take all the scratchy animals. Now go, because I have to do some work. And his work was not animal husbandry. It was not caring for the cows and the pigs and the sheep and the chickens. No, it was treasure hunting. It was digging holes to see if there was any gold anywhere. Dig, dig, dig. Nothing. Walk 10 paces, start again. Dig, dig, dig. Nothing. And so it went on. Now, meanwhile, his sister was watching astounded. Our father didn't look after us because he was obsessed. And now you have land and you have animals and all you can do is dig holes. But he told her to go away. You don't know what you're talking about. Go and look after your animals. And she went and looked at her animals. She had the worst cow. It was all thin, with all its bones sticking out. And a donkey who had bald patches and groaned all the time. But she didn't give up, you know. She knew which herbs were good for animals. So she fed the cow all the nutritious herbs, the nice bits of grass. She spent time soothing it, putting creams on the places where it was rubbed raw. She looked after her animals. And gradually, you know, some of the other animals from the farm who weren't being looked after by her brother came to join her. And soon she had a nice collection of chickens scratching away round her little house. Her little house was very small, very broken, but she managed to get tables and chairs and a bed, and right next to her little house was what had been an orchard. Now in Somerset, orchards are very, very important because that's where you grow your apples. And apples are really important because that's how you make your cider at the end of the year. Now you might make a bit of apple juice, but really, no, it was all about making the cider. Every year they brought in all the apples. You can even use the apples that are down on the ground. And you don't have to cut them up properly. You just slice them up and you throw them all in and you pulverize them down and you leave them to ferment for months. Oh, there is the big pressing process. That's quite a good treat when you get all the apples and you press it down. You see, this was a rich farm, and in one time there was a good orchard. But now, like the animals, the trees look like scrappy little nothings. Branches were all broken. Bits had gone wild over this side and dead on this side. Weeds had grown up through the trees. Blight had got some of them. It was just a mess. Trees, you know, apple trees, they sort of fall over at times. They get so heavy. So it looked like a whole load of very odd looking monsters. When the daughter first went out, she just ignored the trees. But then as the summer came and there were blossoms on the trees, it made her heart glow. So she got the chickens out under the trees, and she got the pigs out and the sheep, and they got the grass down. And she weeded away and she dug a patch for her vegetables. She started looking after the trees and caring for them. And surprisingly, she made a little bit of money that year, selling her eggs and her chickens. And soon she was feeling a bit more comfortable in the house. And when autumn came, of course, it was time to pick all those apples, all those amazing apples. Well, they weren't amazing this year, but there were a few more than if she'd never gone out and cleared anything. And they were a bit scratchy, the apples, you know, a little bit small and manky, but that's how you make cider. And she enjoyed the whole process of preparing it. And you press it down and you put the juice ready to ferment in big stone jars. And she put it on the shelf, hoping it'd be ready for Christmas. Well, time passed and it got tough for her, because in the winter, you can't grow so many vegetables. The chickens don't lay, the ducks don't lay, and the animals want to be inside and be warm. And it was getting to be difficult. But it was coming up to Christmas and she was looking forward to Christmas so much. And she remembered her cider. And she just checked that stone jar, that round stone jar sitting on the shelf. And she looked at it and realized there was a crack. And a crack meant a hole, and a hole meant the liquid had come out. And she shook the pot. There was about 1 cupful in there. And I don't know why, but that day, that coldness of the winter coming on, that day, it really upset her that she didn't have any cider. But she didn't give up. She turned the pot upside down, that jar, and she stuck it back on the shelf. So at least a little bit that would last up until Christmas. So Christmas was Christmas Eve. It was about to be Christmas. And she was getting her meager house prepared for the celebration. She had so little, but that was important. And then she remembered her bit of cider. One of the things we do in Somerset is we celebrate our trees. Now, in this story, it was before Christmas, but some people do it on Christmas, some do it in the new year. But we wassail our trees. We treat them to a good bit of toast soaked in cider. Very nice it is for the trees. I don't know why they like it, but they really like it. It's nourishing. Yes, exactly. So she prepared the toast and she poured on that tiny bit of cider. That's all she had. And she placed it in the tree. And then you take a stick. And it may sound vicious, but you beat the tree. But many say this is to get those terrible insects out who are going to eat the tree in the spring. So you don't actually hit the tree hard. You just beat all the way round on the bark to get the insects, the wigglies out. And while you do that, you sing your wassail song. We have come to wassail you, to wassail you, to wassail you. We have come to wassail you on this fine night. Join us as we wassail you, we wassail you, we wassail you. Join us as we wassail you on this fine night. Now, sometimes they let off bangers into the night sky. That's to frighten the insects as well. And sometimes people decorate the trees with ribbons. But the girl, she had 1 ribbon that she kept in her hair. And she took out the ribbon, the only ribbon she had, and she put it on the tree. And it was only then that she felt the sadness of the end of the year, the sadness that she had nothing more to give to the tree, the sadness that she had got nothing and her brother was digging holes in the ground to find treasure. It was a big sadness. And she was just standing there in the dark on her own. And she looked at the tree, and do you know that tree, it looked like it had a big smile across it. Now you might say it was just the branch or where the branch had been. But to her, it was like a face looking at her, smiling, and she smiled back. And she heard the words, dig under me. She looked round. Again it came, dig under me. She looked again. Dig under my roots, my roots, my roots. Dig under my roots. Well, of course, she thought she was going absolutely bonkers. But, it was Christmas. It's worth a try. And as the family had spent their entire lives digging holes, she thought, I may as well try and dig. And she laughed at herself when she went to get her spade. She said, I'm being an idiot. But she brought back the spade anyway. And she started to dig down under the tree and she laughed. Oh, I don't know why I'm digging this. I'll carefully do it so I can put everything back. And she dug and she dug, and then she planted her spade in, and it went karunk. Karunk. There's something there. There's really something there. And there was a big box, a box. She bent down and she lifted it. Oh, it was heavy. And she opened it and she closed it up tight. It's got gold in. And she didn't know what to do. She looked at it again. And she thought, I'm being silly now. I'll take it back to the hut, and perhaps in the morning it'll all be gone. So she filled in the hole and she took the money away. And there she was, with all this gold in the house. And she decided she better be careful, because she knew what her brother was like. He'd be round in the morning, seeing what she had to give him for Christmas. So she hid the gold in her old welly boots, the ones with the holes in at the back, which let in the water. But they didn't let out the gold. So she poured the gold in her wellies. And then she put a load of mud and dirty stuff on top so he wouldn't look. Now, meanwhile, her brother, he'd heard this tale that on Christmas Eve, the animals talked. As the bells sounded for 12 o'clock, magic happened. And the animals would tell him where the gold was. And he really believed it. So he went and hid with the animals. And he waited for the church clock, which just has stopped dinging away. I mean, it's been dinging on and off all the way through. And now when you need it to ding, there we are, they're dinging again. So when the clock on the church sounded, the brother listened. Was there going to be animals talking? And there was a gentle munching and a mooing and a moo. And then somebody said, he thinks we're going to tell him all about the gold. All the gold is gone. All the gold is gone. You're too late. All the gold is gone. And that was it. The cows were back to being cows. Well, of course, the brother didn't believe it. All the gold is gone. That's what people have been saying for years. All the gold is gone. Next morning, Christmas Day, he wandered round to see his sister and just see how she was getting on and berate her about something. But when he got there, the whole place was empty. Not a cow or a donkey or a sheep or a pig or a chicken or a duck. There was just a pair of boots turned upside down, because his sister had woken up very early in the morning. She'd packed all the gold on the back of the donkey. She tied the cow to the donkey. She tied the sheep and the pig together, and she stuck the chickens in one basket and the ducks in the other, because she didn't believe her brother wouldn't want to find the gold, and life would continue with him being greedy. So she set off before anyone was awake. And she walked and walked and walked. And she met a stranger. And he said, "Where are you going?" And she said, "To the land where there is kindness, where people smile and everyone shares." And that is the end of the story of the apple tree man, who played a very small part in the finding of the gold. Thank you very much. Whoa. Okay. So we're going to have another Somerset story now, because I don't know why we're just having, yeah, we'll have to have a little bit more Somerset. And it's going back to the moons. We've got lots of moons tonight because there was definitely some sort of light in the orchard when the apple tree spoke to her. So this is another, starts with a night, doesn't end with the night and the moon, but it starts there. There was a fisherman, and he liked walking around at night, especially when the moon was bright. And this evening he'd gone down to a bit of the land that juts out into the sea. Now, the north coast of Somerset is coast. The rest of the county is all surrounded by other counties, but this is a coast. But a lot of the land there is not very nice sea. It's not paddly sea, it's mud. But this little bit of land, it juts out. And that's where he lived. And he went to this little bit of land, and the moon was full on the sea. I was feeling really good about looking at the moon on the sea when he heard singing, beautiful singing. And immediately when he heard singing, he hid his ears, because it would have been the sea morgan singing. And you mustn't listen to the sea morgan. The sea morgan is a mermaid. But you see, in Somerset, we call them sea morgans because they're a bit more hairy. But they still sing beautifully. So he hid his ears. He put his hands over his ears, but he still looked at the beautiful moon. And then he took a quick listen. No more singing. So it was safe to walk onwards. And he walked on and looked in the sea. Nothing. And he walked round the headland, round the pointy bit on the pathway. And there was a beautiful shallow pool. Somehow the sea had thrown up the water into this pool. And there in the pool was a baby. A little baby splashing away and gurgling. And it was a beautiful baby. And he watched it and he thought, it's a bit of a funny time of night for a baby to be out. So he took a very careful look around and he could see nobody. And he checked everywhere and he could see nobody. And so he thought, my wife, she can't have little babies. She would love a little baby. So he picked up the baby and he took it home. And his wife, oh, she was delighted. It was a beautiful little baby girl and it chortled and gurgled. And she kept it. But there was one problem with this little baby. The happiest times of its life was when it was in water. Some children, they do attract water. I don't know how they do it. My three attracted water like, oh, they still do. This little girl, as soon as she could walk, she would tumble down to a pond, to the river, to the sea. She would always be wet. It seemed like her hair was always wet and dripping. The mother could never seem to quite dry it. She loved splashing in ponds. She loved sitting so the water flowed over her, which was not very convenient when you dressed her up properly. And this habit never stopped. As this little girl grew up, she was good in many ways, but she always seemed to come home wet. She used to leave the house almost dry and come back soaking wet. And there was another difficulty. She didn't like a lot of noise. She was happy by herself and she would sing beautifully. And then people would hear her sing and try and join in and she would cover her ears and run away. She would get so confused with all the noise of people. Now, the farmer and his wife lived in a little village, like the little village here. And somebody heard the little girl sing. And they wanted her in the church choir. And it was an honor to be asked to join the church choir. And of course, the parents took her along. And the poor little thing, she stood there in all this noise. There was the organ playing and people singing, and it was horrendous. And all she would do was put her hands over her ears and shake. So being in the church choir did not last long. And it did not go down well in the village. They started muttering. That little girl is strange. She's not quite right. There's something definitely wrong with her. And then she would start disappearing during the service in the church. She would run out. She would skirt round the back of the pews and disappear because, you know, who wants to be in there when the sun's shining and there's things to be doing? It was far more exciting to be out than in. And one day she escaped and she ran, and it was a hot day. And there was the village pond. And so she jumped in and splashed and swam and did all those things that a little girl should not do ever, ever, ever. And that's when the little whispers turned to shouting. And they called that little girl all sorts of terrible names, names that never should be said and will not be said. And strange people marched all the way down to the fisherman and his wife's cottage, shouting about that girl, and she should be taught a lesson, and there's something wrong with her, and they were going to capture her. I don't know what they thought they'd do with her. But the little girl had had enough. And she went and she hugged her parents. She gave them big, long hugs and said it was okay. And she ran out the back door, along the pathway to the cliff. And when she got to the cliff, she leapt freely, releasing herself right into the water. Splash. And that is when the sea Morgan went home. Thank you very much. I'm hoping that's exactly the right time.
That is precisely the right time. You do everything with precision, Sarah. Big round of applause for Sarah Lloyd Winder. Fantastic trio of stories there. Amazing. Leaping into our weekend, literally leaping into the weekend with that leap from the cliff. And tomorrow, Saturday, we are live from the World Storytelling Cafe in Marrakesh, where Andrew Antrobus, a poet, is reading on his British Council tour. They're using the physical cafe in Marrakesh as a venue. Ali's presiding over the hybrid section of it, so we can join in. We can actually, you can see the cafe again, Sarah.
Get excited again. Feel like I'm going home again.
Yeah, Baba C can't because he's got things to do. He can watch it on catch up. But Baba C, are you around on Sunday?
Is water wet?
Absolutely. Well,
so I may have the cameras off because I might still be recovering from Saturday, but I'll be there Sunday.
But Sunday, we have at 3 o'clock in the afternoon UK time, 4 o'clock Moroccan time, we have the first of our story rounds from the cafe. And it's appropriate that it starts on World Storytelling Day. And so we've got the young storytellers of Morocco, of Marrakesh, on their story round. Zuhair is presiding. I expect they'll be telling tales in several languages, which will be fantastic. Then at 6 o'clock, we've got our worldwide story round. And then we get into our week, which will be Tuesday at 4:30 with our young international tellers. So it gets busier and busier and more using of the cafe itself. Baba C, on Sunday, if I should happen to be absent for either of those, could you be me?
Well, you know, they say we're twins, so yes.
Yeah, I might be.
I just want to get one thing clarified. So it's 3 o'clock UK time.
Yeah.
That means it's 11 o'clock my time?
Something like that. You'll have to
Or
look
12.
that up. I don't know.
All right.
But
I'll check it again.
I will do your research for you if you want, Baba C.
I'd appreciate it, because I spent an hour.
It's 11 o'clock, Baba C, because we've only got a 4-hour difference because our clocks haven't gone forward yet and yours have.
Right, so it's 11 o'clock because I spent an hour trying to sign in earlier today. When it hit me, oh no, it's 4 hours difference, not 5 for right now. So yes, I will be here tomorrow. I have 7 alarms set.
No, Sunday you mean?
Yes, Sunday. See, I'm already ahead of the game.
Fantastic. Meanwhile, thank you, Sarah Lloyd Winder.
Yay!
Louis, you're probably swimming by now, but have a lovely week.
He's in the car.
I am. I've read it in. I'm not in yet. I'm early.
All right.
Right,
So you're on your way.
I'm just ready here. My friend's not here yet, and my friend's not here either. So it's real early.
Fantastic. And Michael Fogarty, thank you for joining us. Anyone else that's there, I'm on my telephone communication device, so I can't see who's there. And Ali, thank you very much, as per usual, for flying the magic carpet. Meanwhile, another huge round of applause for the fantastic, the phenomenal, the fantabulous Sarah Lloyd Winder.
With the church bells.
And the church bells. I thought they just added to it. Anyone for our friends in India or elsewhere, happy Holi and or Spring Festival or Festival of Colours, whatever you want to be calling it. Meanwhile, goodbye.
Bye all. Thank you.
Until the next time.
See you.
See
you next
time.
See you, darling. Bye.
And the wonderful person in the Storytelling Cafe.
Hi.
I'm trying to leave here.
Hello.
Hello. I see you're there.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for this fruitful event, and big thanks to Sarah Lloyd, the big storyteller, and also for Baba C. I'm so proud and I'm so happy to meet you again and again. And
Tell us your name again. Tell us your name again.
Baba C.
No, tell us your name again.
My name is Anas.
Anas, we know that.
Yeah,
but Baba
yeah.
C doesn't have any memory cells because
Not for names.
he lost them all when he was going back across the Atlantic.
Yes.
Yeah, actually we had
thank
so
you.
many.
I never remember names.
Yeah, we had so many wise discussion with my friends Baba C here in Marrakesh.
Yes.
Yeah, do you remember this?
Yes.
Yes. And
I remember
also
discussions, just not names.
Right.
Nice. So, Mr. John also, big up to you. I'm so glad to meet you here in Marrakesh, and I would like to meet you all here again and again. You are welcome.
Well, we
to
shall
your,
shall come back and back and back. You can't lose us.
Yeah, I hope so. So this is your second home.
Yeah, and Anna, so you're going to be in the cafe over the weekend.
Yeah, of course. This
Fantastic.
is a very nice cafe.
Yeah.
Actually, today I start working here. Today is my first day here.
Fantastic. Welcome.
So
welcome.
I'm so delighted. So This is my first experience here.
And tomorrow's a very important day at the cafe.
Yeah.
So we rely on you to keep it all under control.
Yeah, of course. I will be happy.
You're fantastic.
Don't
Well,
worry.
we're so glad that you're there. Okay. Bye, Anas. Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
Mr. John. Babasi.
Until the next time.
See you. Yeah. Bye.